I'm a sinner, left my lover crying on the dance floor. I'm a sinner, I'm a sinner.
Hello guys, welcome to Sinfully Fun Games. So what are we looking at today? Slow damage. We're gonna get spooky. Ooh. Okay. Let's see. New canvas. Tools. Let's go into that for a minute. Just a little. There we go. Okay. Put the text speed up a bit. Yep, that works. Yeah, that might not be good. That's interesting. I do like how they're doing this. How do I go back? Oop. So it's going to be an artistic one. Can't say I don't like that. Alright, so let's jump in. Thank you for purchasing Slow Damage. Before we begin, here's a helpful explanation of the interrogation gameplay segments. You'll need this information because interrogation can be tricky. You'll be able to skip the tutorial on subsequent playthroughs. During the interrogation, as you speak to your target, try to fill the euphoria gauge. Doing so will progress the story. That's your ultimate objective in every interrogation. Talk to him and try to expose a secret. The text you see in your memo pad will serve as a hint. Act accordingly to make progress in the interrogation. That being said, it's only a hint and isn't necessarily always the right choice. Depending on the flow of the conversation and your target's body language, you may want to take things in a different direction. Your choices will determine the outcome. Next, let's talk about the hourglass and jagged lines. The hourglass represents your target's euphoria level. Fill the hourglass to the line at the middle, and the sand will start glowing. This means you've achieved full euphoria. As you approach full euphoria, read the line. The red line will flash, letting you know you're almost there. The purple line at the bottom is the minimum baseline for euphoria. If the sand should fall below this line, well, end. I think this one will be when we do a full Let's Play. It'll result in a game over, so be careful. Does that not work? Here we go. The sand will glow to warn you if you start to get too close. The jagged line represents the target's madness, in other words, their emotional wounds. Their wounds are ripped open, madness will increase. If the blue fill line, you'll achieve full madness as you approach. It'll start to glow. At full madness, the hourglass will start to crack, like so. Oh, okay. As the wound closes, madness will decrease. Achieving full euphoria will complete the interrogation. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, that is very click-happy. You have to be careful. High euphoria will grant a full euphoria bonus. Low madness will inflict a madness penalty. Low madness will inflict a madness penalty. And high madness will grant a madness bonus. This concludes the Euphoria and Madness tutorials. To check your objective, move the cursor over the right-hand edge of the screen. That way you won't forget.
な
You're the vampire everyone's talking about, right?
あ
No, I'm not a vampire. Give a positive response to agree and a negative response to disagree. During the interrogation, you can respond with negative or positive answers. Passive answers are negative, while more assertive answers are positive. This decision will affect your target's euphoria and madness. Their status is displayed at the bottom of the screen, so choose carefully to raise their euphoria. As for the raising their madness, why don't you give it a try?
ポジティブそうか
Deny it all you want, but that's how people see you. Here's where you'll use inspiration gained by talking to people in the exploration segments. We'll talk more about exploration later. Using your inspiration will impact your target's euphoria and madness. In fact, it gives you a bigger boost compared to negative and positive answers. Additionally, inspiration has a few different patterns. 2 choices, A or B. Sequential questions, A to B. And even 2-choice answers, A or B, that lead to sequential questions, A to B, B to A. If this all sounds confusing, don't worry. Use your inspiration whenever you see something you want to ask more about. And unlike negative or positive, you can always choose to not use your inspiration at all. Sometimes it's the best option is to say nothing at all. Now let's give it a try. Okay, so we are looking at this. Quick save. Save load. Next, let's go over special objectives. See how the hourglass is painted over black? This tells you that euphoria is not the goal this time. When the hourglass is black, madness is the goal. And on rare occasions, the goal may be to avoid full madness. You'll have to judge for yourself, depending on the circumstances. In situations where euphoria is not the goal, don't let the sand fall too low or it's game over. This time, the hourglass has been repainted white. This means the goal is changed back to full euphoria. As you can see, the hourglass may offer hints about the objective.
傷跡
If you fill the euphoria gauge within the specified number of turns, you can use clues acquired in the story to rip open your target's secret scars. Pick the right clue and the wound will open, progressing the story. But be careful, the wrong choice will lower the euphoria gauge. If you haven't reached full euphoria once it's time to choose a clue, game over. And if you fall below euphoria line, that's game over too. Now use a clue to see if you can open this man's secret scar.
喉が渇く
This concludes the interrogation tutorial. If you'd ever like a refresher, check the interrogation section on how to play. Without further ado, welcome to Slow Damage. I do like me some weird. The human heart is soft, like a fistful of fine sand. So, you must be very careful with how you handle it. Whoop, did not mean to hit that. Huh. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. I never imagined my wish would come true. You've made me so happy. Nope. Nope. Let's throw no sound effects down just a little bit. I was gonna be like, can you not do that? Yeah, why was that all the way up? There we go. It started to rain. Mindlessly, I moved my brush. The patter of the rain mingled with the faint scritching of paint spread across the canvas. The sound slowly filled my empty head. It felt like my insides were melting in the heat of the dark desire that I had just harvested. But before that feeling faded away entirely, I needed to get it out of my system. I needed to capture it on canvas. No one's home. He said no one's home. Leave. Be gone. Shoo.
Oi.
Hi.
Oi.
Yes.
起きろ。
No.
いつまで寝てるんだ。
I like sleeping. A familiar deep voice spoke into my ear, summoning me back to the waking world. Was it morning or closer to noon, or was it later than that? I'd slept like the dead, and my perception of time was shot. I lifted my head from the sofa where I lay face down. My eyelids were particularly glued shut. Or practically glued shut. Blinking, I forced them open. What time had I gone to bed last night? Definitely some time past midnight. At some point, I had passed out on the sofa.
もう昼だぞ。出勤時間はとうに過ぎてる。
So, at this, I sluggishly pushed myself up into a sitting position. Hi. The other man peered closely at me, exuding orange smoke. This was Murasi Takuma, or Taku for short.
お前な、常々思ってるんだが、本当に働く気があるのか？
Not really.
ああ。おい、ちゃんと目を見て返事しろ。
You're nice. I looked up into Taku's reproachful eyes. His brow was furrowed deeply.
あるって。
As I spoke, I grabbed a pack of cigarettes off the coffee table, pulled one out, and put it between my lips.
あのな、悠長にタバコを吸ってる暇があるなら、とっとと起きて支度しろってんだ。
Right as I lit my cigarette and took my first slow drag, Taku reached out and ruffled my hair. I shook my head slightly to knock his hand away.
ったく。
Taku let out an exaggerated sigh. His other arm carried a stack of clean clothes. He was sort of a busybody who would periodically come into my apartment to clean and do laundry. According to him, it would turn into a pigsty otherwise, and he was correct.
ここに置いておくぞ。
He set the clean laundry on the bed and then turned to the door.
しかしこの部屋、ほんと油臭いよな。
今更だろ。
ま、別に嫌いじゃないがな。あ、それとお前、またテレビつけっぱなしだったぞ。いい加減ちゃんと消してから寝ろよ。
多分な。
You're not my dad.
多分ってなんだ。それじゃ、下で待ってるぞ。早く来いよ。
Or my wife. And with that, he left. The paint smell could be traced to the stuff I'd piled over in the corner, a bunch of canvases, a slapdash collection of paints, a well-worn palette, and a handful of brushes. A forest of rectangular canvases, a disorganized pile of paints, old worn-out palettes and brushes. But the fumes didn't bother me, or maybe I was just used to them by now. I'm gonna like this game. I leaned back against the sofa, cigarette between my lips, forcing my fuzzy brain to think. What happened yesterday? Hold on. There we go. Oh, that's right. Yesterday I'd gone out late at night to drink at the usual place. Then some rando started talking to me. I was totally blitzed, so when he invited me to leave, I jumped at the chance without even looking at him. Then he led me into a narrow alley, and for some reason, we were both so horny we started screwing right there. Even I couldn't tell you why I was so worked up. Now my back ached from being slammed up against a brick wall. The guy wasn't much of a lay. How old was he? 20s? Nah, maybe early 30s. Regardless, I must have accidentally taken too many pills when I got home because I slept like a log. It was Taku who prescribed them to me in the first place, since I've always been kind of an insomniac. On the nights I didn't take them, I'd either have terrifying nightmares or I'd drift in and out of sleep all night long, sometimes until noon. Last night I was so drunk I couldn't remember how many I'd taken. Nothing new there. I knew you weren't supposed to take medicine with alcohol in your system. As a result, I always felt like shit. Taku kept telling me to knock it off, but I had no plans to stop. I pinched the cigar between my fingers, drew my sleeve to my nose, and took a whiff. It reeked of booze, smoke, and sweat. I knew Taku wanted me downstairs ASAP, but I needed a shower. Last time I went to work in this state, the elderly patients all gave me dirty looks. Right. Cigarette in mouth, I rose to my feet and stretched, but then I became aware of my empty stomach. With the idle realization that my body was hungry, I slid my gaze over the table and floor. What I sought wasn't food, but booze. I seem to remember leaving a half-empty bottle somewhere around here, but I couldn't find it. Did Taku move it? If so, he probably put it back in the fridge. But to me, getting stuff out of the fridge was too much effort. If he'd offered me food or alcohol, I'd take the booze without hesitation. Food never interested me much. With nothing to drink, my only option was to take one last drag and then crush my cigarette in the ashtray. As I exhaled gray smoke, I trudged into the bathroom and stepped into the shower stall. This is going to be interesting. I like the opening. And the weirdness I think we're going to get. Tokyo in the year of 22X. Mega Man's around. After Japan went to great lengths to host the Olympic Games, the international sporting event ended in record-breaking failure. Burdened with massive debt, the nation was plunged into economic insecurity. The poverty rate, which had been slowly growing since the late 2010s, showed no sign of abating. Then, starting in the early 2020s, the gulf between the rich and the poor widened dramatically. Young people in particular were especially impoverished, and the underemployment rate soared to more than 60% for both men and women. Even with a full-time job, they knew they would be overworked and underpaid, thus the suicide rate shot up. Also increasing exponentially among young people for the first time ever, homelessness and crime rates. The nation of Japan were visibly heading into a decline. This was a major recession on a historical level. The one outlier was Shinkomi. Previously called Tokyo Waterfront City, this was the only part of the country where casinos were legally allowed to operate. As a result, it was reestablished as a special economic zone. But the government's infamous casino bill received criticism on all sides. At the start of construction, the hired contractor, the Takasato Gumi, was suspected of rigged bids for the contract. After a tremendous struggle, they eventually settled on a more realistic proposal. The bill would only legalize small-scale public casinos in specific areas. When the dust settled, all that remained was a steel frame monument on a vacant lot and a community of prostitutes and vagrants. You had a chance and you fucked it up. But then there came a turning point. The leader of the Takasato Gumi, Takasato Ryujiro, offered to buy the whole thing and take over operations. Everyone assumed it would end in failure, but as it turned out, he received a great deal of funding behind the scenes. In this dark era, the people wanted someone to change things, so they clung to the first ray of hope they thought they saw. Plagued with crushing national debt and a dying economy, the government had no other option. A short time later, after an agonizing debate, the Takasato Gumi was given full control of Shinkumi development and operations. None opposed the subsequent amendment to the casino bill, which slashed the public-only requirement. A year later, the city was overflowing with people in pursuit of liberty and money. Lured in by the all-encompassing resort facilities, international tourism increased by 60%. And so, Shinkumi became known as Japan's biggest casino resort. Office buildings and recreational attractions sprang up one after another, creating a massive entertainment district. Next came the residential and business districts, and after that, Shinkumi became the one bright spot amid the devastating depression. Meanwhile, it required a certain amount of aggressive force to control the world full of unspoken rules. As Shinkumi brought Japan's economy back to life, the Takasato Gumi began to expand their control. Eventually, when the tactic threats stopped working, the government designated Shinkumi as a special administrative region. After that, the Takasato Gumi essentially had their own little nation that they could govern as they saw fit. But this splash-dash prosperity was never destined to last long. Everything began to decline at a slow, leisurely pace. Now, more than a decade later, in the year 20XX, Mega Man is taking Dr. Wily, who is really in charge. Man, imagine if that was the thing that ended up in this game. The generation born during the decline of the early 21st century were henceforth called hapless children. Day in and day out, they traveled to the business district, either to forget their chronic depression or earn enough money to eat that day. The casino industry was still thriving, but the bubble had burst. And as Shinkumi started to decay, criminal activity became more common. Nevertheless, with one last shred of hope in their hearts, they lingered in this lawless town. It's no use. This just isn't enough. Not anymore. Phrase. What? On a quiet corner of a residential block, Murasa Clinic stood concealed amongst the rows of prefab houses. This tiny clinic first opened 7 years ago, privately owned and operated by Murasai Takuma himself, specializing in internal medicine, dermatology, and gastroenterology. Dr. Murasai had an upstanding reputation that attracted patients not just from the local neighborhood, but workers from the business district too. The clinic opened its doors somewhat late at 10 a.m. From 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m., Taku would take a long lunch, and then, after he got back, he'd stay open until 1 a.m. His unusual hours were dearly appreciated by night workers who couldn't find time to go to the doctor otherwise. I had a part-time job here at this clinic. In exchange for low wages, Taku let me sleep in the apartment upstairs on the top floor of the clinic. Below that, the second floor was home to the secondary medical ward, full of hospital cots. The primary medical ward was down on the first floor, next to the exam room. As for Taku himself, he didn't live here at the clinic. I never asked for this job or this rented room. It was all his idea. He wanted me to build character or something. That was why he never fired me, no matter how badly I overslept. Conversely, you could say he didn't put any stock in me whatsoever. I didn't fight it, since it would only create more of a hassle, but I wasn't interested in improving my life. If he got sick of me and threw me out on the street, then so be it. I felt no fear toward the future. Not because I couldn't picture it, but because I had no real sense of urgency. I knew it would all work out regardless. Or maybe I just didn't have anything left to lose. As soon as I walked out of the bathroom, a yawn escaped my lips. I hadn't bothered to dry my hair. Sleepily, I scanned the room with one blurry eye. On a whim, my gaze settled on the pocket watch hanging on the easel in the corner of the room. I couldn't remember when or where I got it, but Ray put it on the easel after he found it lying around somewhere in my room. That was a few years back. The watch itself was stopped, but I didn't feel like winding it, so it was basically just there for decoration. Instead of the non-functioning pocket watch, I looked up at the wall clock. It was just past 11:15 a.m. If I didn't hurry down to the first floor, Taku was going to come raging up here any minute now. I got dressed and left the apartment without bothering to lock it behind me. When I walked to the elevator and pressed the down button, there was nothing in that apartment worth stealing anyway. I rode the elevator down to the first floor, then headed to the waiting room. Sitting at the reception desk where I worked was an uptight guy by the name of Arimura Tsukasa. When he spotted me, he scowled, rose to his feet, and left the desk. The look on his face screamed, "You're late!" Technically, I was supposed to be covering the reception desk, but Arimura must have come in to cover me. This happened on occasion, and that occasion happened, well, a lot. An aura of faded blue swayed around Arimura. I call this colorful aura smoke. Apparently only I could see it. Each person had their own unique colored smoke, which shifted depending on their mental state. The most obvious change happened when someone was angry. The color would get muddy. I couldn't see my own smoke, however. No clue when I first started seeing it. From what I could remember, I used to think everyone could see it. Once I found out that wasn't the case, I stopped telling people about it. Was it some kind of superpower? Probably not. More than likely, it was a proof that something was wrong with me, like a hallucination. Hence, I generally didn't give it much thought.
Yo.
I do like this. I called out to Arimura in spite of his resting bitch face. I like this game. He was the most reliable nurse, Wow, why can't I get this name? It's even easy, too. Murasi. There's something about the UR that keeps throwing me off. The Murasi clinic had. I'm just gonna say, move. Whenever his shift ended, he would go downtown to go drinking at the gay bar. Apparently, I wasn't his type. Yeah, he likes guys that knows how to get up early.
父さん、遅れて悪かったって。
いいえ、それは今更なのでもういいです。それより、自分宛ての荷物はちゃんと持って行ってください。いつも置きっぱなしじゃないですか。
ああ。
放置するなら処分しますから。
All mail delivered to the clinic was taken to the staff room. Aramura was in charge of sorting it. Sometimes I would buy art supplies or books online, but other than that, I never got any packages. So if I received anything else in the mail, I just assumed it was junk and didn't bother collecting it.
それでいいよ。
His eyes narrowed even further, but I ignored him and stepped into the staff room. The reception desk and staff room were divided by a single curtain. I pushed past it and arrived at the reception desk interior. Aramura gave me a dirty look and walked off down the hall. He's the prissy gay guy, isn't he? From here on, I would spend the next few hours bored out of my skull. The clinic was quiet, peaceful, and utterly devoid of stimulus. Someone get this man a switch. I called the next patient up to pay their bill. Then I set their medical exam card, insurance card, itemized bill, and prescriptions up on the counter. Robotically, I processed the payment. Then, biting back another yawn, I called for the next patient to proceed to the exam room. I like the little color in his hair. Slow damage. You know what it reminds me of? The music and stuff kind of reminds me of Persona. Like the stylization, too. Today, my shift ended in the afternoon, so I headed back to my apartment. I lounged lazily on the sofa for a while. Then, after the clinic closed, I headed back downstairs. No real reason. I was just bored of my apartment. The music probably does it too.
今日も働いたな。
As I sat slumped on a bench in the empty waiting room, Taku walked out from the hallway, his orange smoke hanging over him. Stretching his arms up, he turned his head from side to side, cracking his neck so loudly, I half wondered if he broke something.
お疲れ。
I didn't need a word of it, though. He snorted at me.
寝坊常習犯に言われたくないな。
Sleeping fun.
ちゃんと働いただろ。
そう言いたければ朝はちゃんと起きろよ。俺。
No. He pulled something out of his coat pocket and tossed it to me. I caught it and looked down. It was a can of coffee.
入れてくれないのか？
お前なんか缶コーヒーで十分だ。
That being said, he was still treating me to a free drink as a token of his appreciation. Taku bought canned coffee in bulk and kept the staff room fridge stocked at all times for this exact reason. Sometimes when he's feeling up to it, he'd make fresh coffee instead, but for the most part, he took the faster, easier option.
備品の発注と掃除終わりました。
Right as I cracked open the can, the exam room door opened and a bubbly voice rang out. He's adorable. It was Izumi Ray, one of the other part-timers. His main job was at a bar called Roost, but since they didn't open until 5 p.m., he would often pick up shifts in the clinic to fill time. Evidently, he wasn't working at Roost tonight, since he was still here this late. Our clinic employed 2 nurses, 4 part-timers, and 1 doctor.
お、ありがとな。
Smiling, Taku looked over at Ray and raised a hand in acknowledgement.
全然いいのよ。気にしないで。
お疲れ。
But as soon as Ray laid eyes on me, he stormed right over to me.
ちょっと。
Mwah.
ん？
あんた今日も寝坊したでしょ。有村君に仕事を押し付けて。
What are you, his boyfriend?
少しだけだろ。
開き直らないの。寝坊は寝坊よ。
He put his hands on his hips and scolded me like he was my mom. But his smoke was bright yellow, and since it wasn't swaying, I could tell he wasn't really that angry. Born to a Japanese father and an English mother, he had a well-sculpted face. Because of this, he was widely popular with our patients, particularly women.
もうあんまり迷惑かけないようにしてよね。有村くん、とっても真面目に働いてくれてるんだから。
そうだそうだ。もっと言ってやれ。
Boss is just amused by this all. Taku leaned back against the reception desk and cracked open his can with a smirk. Believe it or not, he was pretty well liked too. Hiding beneath that stubble and post-work fatigue was a manly, rough-hewn face. Plus, the patients all praised his warm bedside manner. To them, his messy hair and stubble was rugged rather than lazy. Weird how this somehow never applied to me.
ってそういや有村君は帰ったか？
とっくの昔に。
そうか。今日はいつもより長く入ってくれて助かったよ、レイ。ありがとな。
どういたしまして。お礼はスイーツでもいいのよ。
ファミレスのパフェでいいか？
オッケー。
As I watched their conversation from the sidelines, my gaze drifted to Taku.
疲れてるな。
ん？
疲れてる。顔が。
おう。
Grimacing, he touched his cheek and sighed. Granted, he always looked tired, but lately it was more noticeable than ever.
何？疲れてるの？寝不足？
それもあるが気疲れだ。
気疲れ？
He let out an even bigger sigh.
うちの患者さん、夜の仕事についてる人も多いだろ？
そうね。昼間はお年寄りや子連れの人もいるけど、深夜になると男女関係なく夜の仕事の人が増えるわね。
ま、その中には事情があって働いてるって人も結構いてな。診察中に悩みを相談されることもあるわけだ。
悩みって、ああ、メンタル面でってことか。
そうだ。家庭の事情だったり、友人や知人には簡単に話せないような重い話だったりな。心の方は専門外だから治療できんが、相談があった時はできる限り話を聞くようにはしてる。無下にするわけにもいかないし、それで患者さんの心が少しでも軽くなるならいいだろう？
そうね。
で、悩み相談ってのは前からちょくちょくあったんだが。
多い？増えたってこと？
うん。少し前までは1週間に1人2人くらいだったんだが、明らかに増えてる。それに、
He seemed to remember something and he stopped short and looked away.
切羽詰まった患者さんが増えた気がするんだ。話をしているうちに泣き出したり、いきなり声を荒げたりとかな。
たまに診察室から怒鳴り声が聞こえてくるけど、あれってそういうことだったんだ。
できることならメンタルケアもしてやりたいとは思うんだが、そうもいかないからな。ただ、感情が高ぶってる状態の患者をないがしろにするわけにもいかんだろ？
そうね。最近、診察時間がやけに長い患者さんがいるなぁとは思ってたけど。
どう対応したらいいものかってずっと考えてるんだが。
Rubbing the back of his head, Taku let out his third sigh of the night. But really, was it any wonder that more and more of his patients were starting to have mental health problems? Over the past decade, Japan's younger generation has been plunged into extreme poverty. A few years ago, you'd see people on TV yelling about the 2030 age demographics' inability to save money or find a stable career, but now it was even worse. These days, you saw women curled up in their underwear on the sidewalk while men started fights and mugged strangers. Young teenagers would be dressed in slutty clothes to work the corners. Compared to 10 years ago, there were a lot more murder cases, and many of them were either unsolved or dropped. The cops were useless too. They couldn't keep up with the growing number of criminals. But of course, here under the Takasato Gumi's thumb, the Shankumi police force was basically just there for decoration. Oh. It's California. The gig economy had become commonplace, so jobs were scarce, the cost of living was high, and wages were at an all-time low. These things all helped drive people to rock bottom, where they had no choice but to keep living. The nation of Japan was seeing povertization on a level that, a few decades ago, was never seen outside dystopian fiction. Shinkumi had a disproportionately large number of hospitals, possibly in correlation to the crime levels. Naturally, there were plenty of unlicensed or back-alley doctors to be found here. These days, hospitals probably had to serve as battered women's shelters on top of everything else. Like Taku said, doctors had a sworn duty to help people, and people here needed help, not just with their bodies, but with their minds too.
つまり、心を病んでる奴が多いってことだろ。
Taku and Wei both turned to look at me.
その言い方、俺は好かんな。
別に間違ってない。
I downed my coffee, set the empty can on the floor, and rose to my feet.
どこ行くの？
散歩。
ちょっと。
But I ignored Ray's frustrated retort and walked to the front door and left the building. Exhaling white fog into the cold air, I reached into the back pocket of my pants and pulled out my cigarettes. I had forgotten to grab a coat, but I was too lazy to go back and get one, so I figured I'd be fine. As I walked down the dirty sidewalk, I put a cigarette between my lips and lit it. In Shikumi, the nights were long. If anything, it had only just begun. Like usual, I stumbled around town on a whim looking for a one-night stand. Not because I was especially lonely, or sought another human's warmth or anything like that. I felt no love, no passion, no desire. All of my emotions had rusted over. Sex was just the only way I could feel anything at all. Well, not the only way. The other way was through violence, fistfights. But what I wanted was an all-out brawl enough to kill me. And I knew there were very few people in this world capable of that. Most people I fought had held back, even just subconsciously, afraid to hurt me beyond a certain threshold. Thus, there was no point in looking for someone special. Generally speaking, I felt very little in the way of standard human emotions. No idea when it started, but I probably wasn't born like this. Sometimes I got irritated when people nagged me too much, but for the most part, I held it in. Other people seemed to see me as an unfeeling monster. But in the rare moments that I was overcome with powerful impulses, when I was raped or beaten, that was when I truly felt joy. And while many were too scared to enact violence directly, there were plenty in this town that loved to hurt people on the inside. So yeah, I had a lot of hookups. If you asked me if I like sex, I'd say yes. But I wasn't interested in learning about the person attached to the dick, nor did I feel like telling them about me. I just wanted them to use me like a fuck toy, then throw me away. That was the compromise I was willing to make. This is gonna be a deep, dark one. You know what? I think that's where we're going to leave this. If you guys want to see more of this, let me know, because I have a feeling I might want to do more. Thank you guys so much for joining me for Slow Damage. Check all the links in the description. If you're not on YouTube, check me out under Purity Sin Gaming and Sinfully Fun Games. And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.